Hello, happy Monday, and welcome to the special edition on Inauguration Day. This Monday, instead of taking questions, what I'd like to do is talk about the transfer of power and what it really means and how it connects to business. So, on this Inauguration Day, which is the symbolic day of transfer of power in the United States, let's talk about how this tradition truly got started. Well, our very first president was George Washington. Washington did some very interesting things as president. And I will say he shaped the presidency as we know it today, some 248 years later of the founding of our country. Well, first off, he only chose to do 2 terms. He could have done a third term, but he decided that 2 was enough and it was time to go and not time to pass on power. So the lesson there is, as leaders, you need to know when to let go of power, when to transfer. The other thing that he did is that he made a point of when people were talking about what should we name the president, and they had all these crazy long, your Royal Highness, your, this, that, and the other. He chose to simply say, please call me Mr. President. Pretty simple. This brings us to our second point of leadership, which is knowing that your role is not to be above everyone, that you are equal to the people that you serve. A really important lesson. The third lesson that he taught us in terms of transfer of power was also knowing how to mentor. He chose to make sure that in everything that he did during his time as president was an example that he was mentoring the next person to come into that office. He didn't assume that he knew everything, but he did know that people were looking at him. They were watching him. They were watching his moves. And it was important that his actions reflect what was important as they built this nation. A really important lesson. In leadership, sometimes people get super excited about becoming a leader and they want to hold on to power. And that's not true leadership. True leadership is knowing when to let go, when to mentor, and when to stay. If you're the last person to leave the party, you've stayed too long. That's really what it's about. And so when we translate that into business, we need to know that our leaders serve us, whether it's in business or in government, that we don't serve them, they serve us. And so in business, it's really reflected in how we treat employees and how we allow ourselves to be treated. When we understand that the power is not held in those who have the title, but are held with the workers, it changes the dynamic of how people think. That it's the workers that bring value to the companies, the same way the citizens bring value to its country. Our leaders are there to serve and support us. We are not here to serve and support them. Yes, they have a vision for how they see the country or the company moving forward, but the reality is we are part of the execution of that vision. And if that vision does not fit the needs of the people or the needs of the company, then it's not a good vision. And it doesn't really matter what that person in leadership thinks that they're doing. The other thing that we need to think about is that when we talk about the transfer of power, as leaders, we need to understand that our responsibility, one of our main responsibilities, is to help nurture and foster future leaders. And not for them to be identical to who we are, but to foster their unique gifts and skills. When we think about the United States in terms of, yes, it's 248 years old, but a lot of times we've talked about it as being a teenager when we talk about it compared to other countries. And it really is a teenager in the sense that it has needs of a teenager as it enters into young adulthood. And with that, it means that it's a different leader that we need for each stage of our lives in our country. The leader that started off in the infancy of a country or in infancy of a business may not always be the same leader that that country or business needs when it goes into its teenage years or transitions from a teenager to an adult. And so we need to remember that in stages of business, the skill sets that we have as the founder or the leader of the company may not be the skill sets that it needs moving forward. And we have to have the self-awareness and the grace to recognize that someone else might be able to lead our company a lot better than we can. And we need to transition into a different position, that we may not be equipped to run the day-to-day, but we might be equipped to run the big picture. And that's really important. And so when we think of partnerships, sometimes we need to look at people who have very different skill sets than what we have. And that also is about transfer of power. We've often been told, when we look at Lincoln's presidency as an example, the great example of having a team of rivals. I love that example. It's an example that, again, President Obama used when he had Senator Hillary Clinton become the Secretary of State in his administration. It's important to recognize that sometimes those who compete against us are not just competing against us in a negative way. They bring out the best of us in those competitions, and we need to recognize their skill sets when they win or lose. That is another example of a good transfer of power and also an understanding of the role of a leader. So on this inauguration day, I'd like you to think about your own work, your own businesses. What does your business need from you now? And are you equipped to give them that to your business? And do you need to think about transitioning from where you are now to where your business needs to be tomorrow? Have a wonderful day. Have a great Monday. I'll see you next Monday for Q&A.